Okay, now let's talk about Ricardian equivalence. For the Ricardo position or Ricardo effect. So it's a very common that all ideas of some of the concepts recorded and embraced in our current time. So Barrow is a modern not a theorem. It is a different theorem. Is something that has been proven in equivalence is you will coming later. It's about difficult at all to understand. It's about fiscal policy. So what do we mean about fiscal policy? Effectiveness of all these parameters we had also crowding out. It's possible that you increase government expenditure, but at the same time private investment decreases, so that effect is very small. Then multipliers. Usually special multiplier greater than 1, tax multiplier is smaller government expenditure. Because of minus b divided by half. Balanced budget multiplier will 1 that we studied when we consider theory. Will be or where have b bigger than g smaller, but the speed is opposite. Overall, we balance, but for a particular year there may be imbalance. And also, what else we say about all fiscal affairs is that budget deficit is very, very common, more common than budget surplus. Governments of course money fast, but that people try to avoid it, evade paying taxes. But the bottom line is the government is always deal budget deficit. So so taxes. It depends what level of tax, who will pay the tax. People don't like taxes. Tax, of course, as soon as you tax that's one way, difficult way. Second one is taxation, but then you need to decide where you cut. Some people will not be if you pay and expenditure on them, so there will be a lot of political. You may do cut cost all other items, but it may also cause the problem. It looks like bad, but it cause the problem. The project, for example, to spend money. If then the project incomplete cannot be used. And everything was supposed to be. For example, you need to spend space into the space. Journey. This you need to spend full amount to complete the task. Right. Next way is to give to the central bank, but it will cost inflation. It's not at all. So last one, to borrow money. Borrow from international organizations money by issuing bonds and selling these bonds to financial institutions. So borrowing from financial institutions, commercial banks, or borrowing from the so selling bonds. In fact, in many countries, financial were quite weak, so government was basically borrowing money from people, basically saying that defend you during the war, please give us money to defend you. And so it's done even compulsory. So instead of receiving full salary, you were obliged to subscribe for the bonds. So you get 20% of the salary. And then, of course, after the war, it took several, and the government eventually borrowing. Right. But the thing is actually that you need to remember, and it's a problem with the Ricardian equivalence, that sometimes borrowing by the government is on a very long-term basis. For example, during World War II, some of the bonds were issued with 50-year maturity. Most people who at that time were 40 long, they would die before actually the government would repay the principal. So that's the problem. Many people actually forget. They will consider that they gave money to the government and fine, let's forget it. Who knows when the government will pay back on. That's a problem with Ricardian equivalence, because Ricardian equivalence is actually thinking that people live long and because the to kids and grandkids, so that kids get money from the bond. Many people don't care actually. They even throw away somewhere because they are not really following. Ricardian equivalence assumes that people look forward, say, 50 or 60 years ahead. Ricardo Barrow effect is about the ways of dealing with budget. Borrowing for one. We'll talk about it. So let's look at the budget deficits. So budget deficits arise. So revenue side, governments are very collect. They don't have good tax office, and there are many loopholes. You know, in some developing countries, the government doesn't even know the population of the country, and obviously they don't know who earns money. There is a shadow economy. That's a problem. Government cannot charge the tax. Secondly, the expenditure may be too high. It doesn't mean that, because it depends what type of expenditure. If the taxes go into the pockets of corruption, if all the needs or things, it's good. So some people from Denmark, Sweden, they say we are okay to pay 50% from this, because we know that it's to people, it's not proper. So that some of the countries, it's actually the countries with developed, Sweden, Denmark, countries in Europe. That's the second way why the deficit may appear. Here is with the government expenditure to GDP ratio. And then populism and lack of budgetary discipline and the rent seeking. So populism is when before the election, government announced will spend on this and re-elected. It's called populism. When people are trying to, when government tries to please the people. Lack of budgetary discipline, it's when officials spend whatever they want. They invent new programs to spend on, and they're not accountable. Maybe there is no need to have these additional programs, but they spend money anyway. And then the rent seeking, just put here, rent seeking. Seeking is when businesses and some organized group capture the government, bribe the officials, and say, spend on our items, spend more on agriculture. Like farmers give bribe to the official, to the prime minister, and prime minister says, okay, we'll spend money on agriculture, let's give subsidies to palm oil producers, so this and that. So it's seeking. And then the last factor may be some events that require budget. So, for example, spending, every government has own series of and builds every new that stuff, but the ones there will be some expense on top of that. Ammunition, building even more competitors. So you can walk forward that I'm the and to buy this is the only way to borrow. The time when effect was very costly, not in terms of humans, but also in the countries they that even not about you case to the war is financial. What I'm saying is a typical problem most of the. So what is an equivalence? Equivalence means two things. First of all, two ways of values. Two ways are equivalent. The effects of these two ways are same. And secondly, fiscal policy is ineffective. Effect what we thought based on our knowledge of parameters and crowding. There is additional factor why fiscal policy is not effective. So let's consider. So the government stimulate a quantity. So if it happens, there will be by deficit, of course. If it's less, as I say, so additional spending brings the government deficit. How to deal with that? But they in all but this increase because income is spent on savings, taxes, and consumption. Suppose savings is not changing, so if one variable up, the other variable will have to go down. The up, C must settle down, and the effect is not to, of course, try not to tax without thinking about the implications. If it's government, the economy will grow. Government decides to bring back the balance every year, then it will increase taxes. Increase taxes, decrease consumption and aggregate expense. One option. You may think that second option, because instead of taxes, it decides to so basically borrowing. You may think that this is like money, we say, and also issue bonds. But who cares about the bonds, right? And most people don't care, and that's how the government problem. It spends money and issuing bonds, and then the next moment, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, will have to pay that debt, but by that time, no one already remembers what happened. So, but Ricardian, so that's how it usually happens. But Ricardian equivalence saying no, they says that rational consumers will actually know what is happening, and so even though the government is not increasing taxes now, but only bonds and in the debt, the consumers will already know that in the future taxes will have to be increased to pay back the debt. And that's why consumers will already be preparing. And that's why they will start saving more money now in order to have more money several years from now so that they can pay taxes. But because they start saving more now, consumption will decrease today. And that's why whether government does option one, consumption will go down, or whether government doing two, consumption still goes down. Therefore, these two ways, option one and option two, are equivalent in the sense that both option one brings consumption down and option two brings consumption down. That's why they are equivalent, and the term is called Ricardian equivalence. What the government is doing to increase the now or borrow more now, the effect consumption will go down. Do you think it's a theory? I personally think that there's some reason in that, but not sure that people prepare for future increase in taxes, I repeat, are needed to repay the debt, because now the government borrowing money. 20 years now it has to repay the debt. Where will the government get money to repay the debt? From taxes. So taxes will have to increase. That's why people start saving right now. I think that people really have about 20 years from. That's why you will say the shortcomings of Ricardian, people do not care. And that's why if people don't care, it will actually be better. With C goes down, but with option 2 you just borrow money, and C is still safe because people who in the real they're not that forward looking. But according to equivalence, yes, start preparing for future reasons that there's more and can. So that's the first point about Ricardian equivalence. The second point about the equivalence of physics. Suppose to stimulate the economy to increase expenditure, want to use taxes to stimulate the economy. What will be the effect? Well, according to Ricardian equivalence, the effect will be following. You will already understand that if taxes are used, the budget will be and budgets have to be cut by high taxes more year. It increases in savings and increase in it's like that what takes in the future. So for higher savings now, smaller consumption now. What it means on one hand increases taxes, but on the other hand consumers decrease their expenditure. So overall the effect on demand is very small. They will not expand and will not increase as in the first weeks of course decrease tax will increase. But if you consider this factor of foreign consumers, the effect of tax is very negligible. So in other words, fiscal policy is not very effective. Say that it is effective, but it is not than if we did consider Ricardian equivalence. So really Ricardian equivalence, you need to questions in the test will ask you about this topic, but I will not put any mathematical elaboration of that. If you want, if you have time, you can read this further and look at the treatment of this Ricardian, but it's not compulsory. What else is applied?